All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Improving Your HealthCheck360 Score, Part 1. Before Coach Jordan and I get started, just a couple of the normal items to take care of. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation, and you can type those into the question box in the lower portion of your control panel. We will be posting a recording of the webinar on our blog. The link for that will be shown at the end. And if you would like a PDF copy of the presentation, there will be a link to download that on that same post as the recording. If your question does not get answered today, please email our support inbox, which will be shown at the end as well. We are very excited to have a two-part series this year for our Improving Your Score topic, as it gives us an opportunity to dive a little deeper into each health topic to really get you some good information on what you can control when it comes to your biometrics. So for today, we're going to focus on nutrition and exercise. On the next part, we will cover stress and sleep. Part 2 is on June 19th, so be sure you have signed up on the blog for that one as well. Before we jump into exercise and nutrition specifically, I want to briefly remind everyone of what we test for on that biometric screening. Now, there are variations to what we test depending on what company you work for, so I'm going to use our standard screening process for our purposes today. Go ahead and pull up your report to find out what you're screened for and also the risk levels for each biometric, as we're not going to get in depth with those today. So first, we have our body measurements. We measure BMI, which stands for body mass index, and is a risk level based on just your height versus your weight. We also measure waist circumference. Higher body weight and waist measurement are correlated with many health concerns, many having to do with things like heart disease. We test blood pressure. The top number, the systolic, is the pressure in our arteries when our heart is pumping. The bottom number, the diastolic, is the pressure when our heart is at rest. High blood pressure puts us at risk for mainly heart attacks and strokes. Glucose, or blood sugar, is the sugar that's in our blood. Developing type 2 diabetes is the biggest risk of having that high blood sugar. Cholesterol, there's 3 parts to our cholesterol. The HDL, which is the good stuff. We actually want more of the HDL because it helps to deliver that LDL, which is the bad stuff, to the liver to be broken down. Excess LDL can clog our arteries and can lead to them hardening, which can cause heart attacks and other health issues. And then we have triglycerides, which is created by excess calories that aren't used up for energy. These can build up as well and cause similar health issues as that LDL. And then nicotine. Nicotine itself can cause glucose and heart rate to elevate. It can cause plaque formation on the arteries. It can cause enlargement of the aorta, which is the largest artery in the body, and enlargement can lead to a rupture, which is not good, as well as things like digestive issues or things like heartburn. And that's not including the products that have nicotine along with all the other chemicals that can cause cancer. Now, we're not going to cover nicotine specifically today, as it's a bit bigger than we would have time for, but if you'd like to chat further about quitting, as it would absolutely have major impact on your health and your HealthCheck360 score, please chat with your doctor and give us a call, and we can absolutely support you with that. We also have a variety of liver and kidney function tests on our standard screening as well, but those aren't scored, so we're going to focus on the biometrics here for today. Again, this is just our standard testing. You may see more tests on your report each year. All right, so what can you do to help get these numbers either moving in the right direction or keep them in a good range if they're already good? Let's talk about how nutrition and exercise affect these biometrics first. We will start with the measurements and with nutrition. So how does nutrition affect our weight and our waistline? This one I feel like is probably the most common sense, I would say, out of the group. If you eat too much in general, your weight goes up as your waistline typically, right? Now, we know it's more complicated than that, but in a nutshell, if you eat too much, these numbers are going to be impacted. Let's talk quality of foods as well. If you eat foods that contain good nutrients or have good nutrient density, is the term we use, your body's going to use these up for various functions, and the foods get metabolized and essentially go away. If you eat something that is full of excess sugars, for example, your body can't use up all of that energy in time and is going to store that energy as fat, making that scale go up. And sugars typically like to get stored in our midsection as well, which makes that waistline go up too, which is, again, not what we want. So quality as well as quantity with our nutrition are going to affect our measurements and our BMI specifically.
All right. Exercise can mean different things for everyone. Some of us really thrive knowing that's a part of our routine, while others are less enthusiastic about physical activity. When it comes to making an effort to improve specific biometrics and our overall health, exercise is an undeniable impact that is worth taking into consideration. As Coach Shelby has begun explaining, properly fueling our bodies is the first step that we must take. Try as we might, we cannot outrun a bad diet. Exercise can directly impact body mass index, blood pressure, glucose, and cholesterol, just to name a few of the usual suspects when it comes to our important biometrics and common health issues that people encounter. Very similarly to the nutrition side of things, monitoring how many calories we consume, it's also important to note how effectively we are utilizing or burning up these calories. This is another reason that tracking diet and exercise are such beneficial tools for finding what works best for us to achieve our health-related goals. Being able to find a calorie range that works as well as exercises that are practical for us to burn up these calories needed is a truly unique combination for everyone. If we overdo it with our eating or are eating things that are less healthy, making sure that we are getting in physical activity will help keep these excess calories from accumulating, therefore having an impact on our body mass index. In addition to the exercise helping to burn up these calories, it will also help rev up our metabolism, which will keep this process continuing throughout the day. Burning more calories than we take in will help to see any weight loss that we're looking for, and we know that the reverse of this is that if we're not burning up any calories, we are storing them.
Exactly. All right, moving on to blood pressure. So how does nutrition affect our blood pressure? Many people think that the connection with nutrition and blood pressure is simply salt or sodium in your diet. Now, there is more to the nutrition connection than just salt, but here is why you were told that. Your kidneys help control your blood pressure by controlling the amount of fluid in your body. The more fluid, the higher the blood pressure. Your kidneys help control your blood pressure by controlling the the kidneys need a balance of sodium and potassium to pull water from the bloodstream to get to the bladder so you can get rid of it. When we eat too much sodium, it can hurt that balance. So that's where that salt intake comes in and why it's important. Now, potassium is on the other side of that sodium discussion, so we can also make sure that we are getting enough food sources of potassium as well to help that balance. Magnesium and calcium are important nutrients as well, which we will touch on again in a bit when we talk about getting started making changes. Another big thing that's going to affect blood pressure comes back to the same place as your BMI, avoiding overeating in general. If our weight is higher due to overeating, our heart has to beat harder to get that blood moving, which increases the pressure, leading to more strain and possible issues. Makes sense, right? The American Heart Association updated the standards for blood pressure just over a year ago, tightening down where you should be. So it's even more important to focus on what you can do for this measurement. And nutrition plays a big part as well as exercise, which Jordan's going to touch on right now.
Well put. So exercise additionally is another important habit for improving blood pressure, as our heart is effectively a muscle, which needs to be exercised the same way we would any other muscle. Regular physical activity or putting our heart through some stress actually makes our heart stronger. A stronger heart can pump more blood with less effort. If your heart can do less work to pump, then the force on your arteries decreases, lowering blood pressure. Many people find themselves in positions at work where they are on their feet all day, but they are usually not finding that their heart rate is increased during this time. So, that is just as important as people with sedentary jobs to find physical activity that will help get heart rate elevated. To keep blood pressure low, you need to keep exercising on a regular basis. It takes about 1 to 3 months of regular exercise in order to have an impact on blood pressure, and the benefits last only as long as you continue exercising.
Consistency is key with the blood pressure and exercise. Same thing with eating. Everything is consistency, making those habits and making them last. All right, moving on to glucose. Glucose is the sugar in your blood. So it makes sense that the biggest way nutrition affects our glucose is sugar intake, right? Added sugars is what we want to focus on. So those not included naturally. So things like fruit are going to be the best examples of those naturally occurring sugars. Now, things like liquid sugars in sodas, sweetened teas, juices, those are a big added sugar one. And then you have the usual suspects like candy and desserts that most people are pretty well familiar with. The American Heart Association recommends keeping added sugars to 25 grams or 6 teaspoons per day of women and 36 grams or 9 teaspoons per day for men. We also need to pay attention to what we call refined carbohydrates. So carbs that have been stripped of the majority of the benefits that those whole grains have, because they basically break down into the same thing as sugars in our bodies when they don't have that extra fiber and things that those whole grains have. So again, white breads, white pastas, rice, cereals, things like that are going to have those majority of the refined carbohydrates that we really want to pay attention to and really cut down on. Your fasting glucose is very much affected by your nutrition leading up to the screening, so keep that in mind when I go over the tips here in a little bit.
For sure, our blood sugar is definitely another important area of focus in our overall picture of health, and it can also be managed through physical activity. According to the American Diabetes Association, insulin sensitivity is increased when we exercise. So your muscle cells are better able to use any available insulin to take up glucose during and after activity. This is how exercise can help lower blood glucose in the short term. In the long term, when you are active on a regular basis, it can also lower A1C. It is important to monitor your insulin levels before and after exercise and adjust the dose or carbohydrate intake along with exercise. Understanding these patterns can also help prevent your blood glucose from going too high or too low.
All right, moving on to the last section here, cholesterol. So we need cholesterol in our bodies. It helps fight inflammation, it helps our bodies. But some of us tend to have too much, which can put us at risk for heart disease like I already mentioned. Cholesterol is a big one when it comes to how much your nutrition plays a part. Now, HDL, that good stuff, like I said, is affected mainly by fiber and healthy fats, and including those into our diet. LDL, again, the bad stuff, is also affected by lack of fiber. Also, we'll go back to our processed foods, and specifically foods that are heavy in those, again, those processed carbohydrates that I already mentioned, and that are fried in heavily processed oils. Triglycerides, that last part in our cholesterol, the amount of food we consume plays a big role in our trigs. If we overconsume food in general, we are typically going to see a rise in our triglycerides. And then once again, overconsuming those negative carbohydrates like the refined white breads, pastas, chips, crackers, those types of things are really what we want to pay attention to with our cholesterol and our triglycerides specifically.
All right, and exercise is right in line there with our eating habits in order to help benefit cholesterol levels. So as we know, HDL is what we consider our good cholesterol score, and these particles help to remove excess cholesterol from the walls of our arteries. Aerobic activity can initiate this cholesterol recycling process, so to speak, and helps to prevent or reverse heart disease. Exercising regularly will increase that HDL by 3 to 6%. Our LDL, as we know, is what we consider the bad cholesterol. And what researchers have determined is that smaller, denser LDL particles actually contribute to cardiovascular disease. Studies have shown that moderate exercise can increase the size of your LDL particles, which can help to reduce your risk of developing cardiovascular disease. And in one study, a 12-week endurance exercise program reduced small LDL particles by up to 17%, in fact.
17%. You guys didn't see that, but Jordan just did a mic drop after giving that information. Again, so that just, we just want to make sure that you guys understand how each thing affects the biometrics and why we need to pay attention to it. So now, you know that it's important to want to improve these numbers, right? You want to stay healthy. You want to know what to do. That's next, right? Let's talk eating first. How do I start? First, track again. Tracking works. If you don't know what you're eating and what is in your food, how can you know that you're improving? There is a lot of misinformation on ingredients and foods out there, so you really need to pay attention, or you could be thinking that you're eating a lot healthier than you actually are. Jordan can attest to this. We talk to a lot of people who think what they're eating is really, really good, but when they track, they realize there's a lot of extra hidden sugars and things like that in a lot of those foods. So
surprises, unfortunately.
Absolutely. So if you already have a tracking app, that's fantastic. If you don't have one, there are a ton of great options out there. HealthCheck has a free app. I have a screenshot of it on here, so take a look at that one if you haven't yet. If you're not so much into technology, that's fine. Use a paper and pen. That absolutely works too. Now, I know tracking can seem daunting and time consuming, but I promise you it's really not that hard. Especially you can use these scanners on the apps or have your favorites marked. You can easily enter them down, or once you've jotted stuff down, you'll get a feel for what's in them. It doesn't take that long to get a good handle on what you're eating. And actually we have some people who will take a picture of their food in the moment throughout the day, and then you actually can log it later when you've got more time. So that's something to think about as well. And again, you don't have to track everything forever. This is just to get a picture of your habits right now so that you can make those small changes. That's what we want. You can track every so often after you kind of get a good handle just to make sure you're staying on track, but it's not something that you have to do 100% of the time for the rest of your life, I promise. So, okay, I'm tracking, I know what I'm eating, I have a ton of information. Now, what do I do with that information? A lot of it, we get questions on that too. Yeah, I track, but what does it mean? But you can use that information to set those goals. And I know it's sometimes hard to know where to start and what direction to go, so I want to give you a little bit more information on that. I'm going to talk about things to track based on each of the biometrics that we're looking to improve. So BMI waist measurement first. We talked about overall calorie intake, right? So track your overall calories. Then you need to figure out how many calories you burn. Now, if you use an app, it typically has your general overall calorie burn based on your information, like your height, your weight, your age, your sex, and then you can input how big of a calorie deficit you want, and then it's already done for you. You just have to follow the calorie requirements. And then you can add in any additional exercise that you do, which will change that calorie intake requirement for the day. Now, the typical and safest recommendation for weight loss is to have a calorie deficit of about 500 calories per day. So you're burning 500 more calories than you're taking in each day. Now that equals about 3,500 calories a week, which in theory leads to about a 1 pound weight loss. Now keep in mind, bigger is not always better, so don't think that if you eat 500 calories and then work out a ton, it's going to lead to more weight loss. It will not in the long run, and it is absolutely not a healthy way to do it. So keep with that 500 calorie deficit per day as a general rule. Now you can chat with your doctor if you're on something more strict than that. There are exceptions to that, but you need to talk with your doctor if you want to do anything more in depth than that. And again, it depends on the individual, but generally it's not advisable to go under 1,200 to 1,500 calories per day. And if you're exercising, it should be even higher than that. And like I mentioned at the beginning, it's more complicated than calories in versus calories out, but this is just a good general start and can be a goal to get you moving in the right direction. And then you can focus on those quality of foods as your next step if you want to go that route. How about blood pressure? I mentioned that getting general weight loss is effective for blood pressure, so use what we just talked about to track that overall intake. We also talked about salt and potassium as two big factors. So for salt, the recommendation is to keep it under 2,300 milligrams a day for the general population. So that's easy to track and work towards as a goal. Most apps will have sodium in that standard tracking level, but some may not have the potassium built in. So just be mindful of that you may need to track that separately. The level to shoot for with potassium is 3,500 to 4,700 milligrams a day. And again, this is going to depend on health status, activity level, ethnicity. So do your research, chat with your doctor as always. And then most of us think bananas when we think potassium, but there are plenty of other foods that pack in the potassium as well. I gave you a little list here of that. Calcium and magnesium are also nutrients to look for to help blood pressure. And again, a few good options here, and then the recommended values for you per day. But there are plenty of other options out there as well. So again, Google it, do some research, find out what works in your diet. Everyone has their preferences for food, so figure out what's going to fit in your diet. And you will find that many healthy overall foods, like your veggies and your fruits, are going to give you multiple nutrients like these. So you're going to be able to get many benefits for multiple biometrics from just eating healthy in general. So if you want to just keep it simple and track that stuff, that's perfectly fine as well. You're still going to get benefits. How about glucose? This one should be pretty obvious by now, I hope. We want to track our sugar. I already mentioned a max of 25 grams for women and 36 for men is that ultimate goal, but set small goals to get yourself started. This number may actually be a lot farther off than a lot of us think as far as how much added sugars we're getting in per day. And again, added sugar can be confusing, but a good rule of thumb, don't count your fruits as sugar, but count pretty much everything else, to be honest. The FDA actually proposed a new line on nutrition labels specifically for added sugar. From the last thing I've read, it got delayed a little bit, but you should start to see that added sugar more. I know I've seen it on some products already where it specifically says added sugar, which is going to help that confusion a lot moving forward. And then again, just be mindful of the quality of your carbohydrates. Look for whole grain options. Gave you some examples there for whole grain options. Oats, 100% if you're reading the labels, 100% whole grain or 100% whole wheat, rye, quinoa, just a couple examples of those good whole grains for you to take a look at. And then lastly, cholesterol. For HDL, we're looking at healthy fats and fiber, like I mentioned. So healthy fats, things like avocado, fatty fish like salmon, sardines, tuna, nuts, specifically almonds and walnuts, chia seeds, olive oil, coconut oil for your foods and your cooking. Fiber-filled foods include almost all fruits and veggies, lentils, chia seeds again, and again, much, much more. Your goal for fiber should be 25 grams per day if you're a woman, 38 grams if you are a man. For LDL, again, we're looking at the fiber and then also go back to that glucose and track the sugar intake as that can affect our LDL as well. And then lastly, triglycerides, which again, sugar, refined carbohydrates, we know that by now. Again, we need carbs in our diet, but you should track how much of those refined carbs that you're getting, the breads, the rice, the pastas, things like that, and look to cut down on those ones specifically. If you're eating healthy, you're going to get plenty of carbohydrates from your fruits and veggies and those whole grain options that you're getting. Okay, let's wrap up nutrition before we get to exercise with Jordan here. If you can determine what you're currently doing, you can find things to change. When you're deciding what to change, please take a second and ask yourself these questions. First, what do you want to change? Now, this answer might be nothing. I get it. Change is hard, but try to pick a change that you are the most motivated to do. And then you ask yourself, what is realistic for me to do? If it's cutting out one soda a week, do that. The smaller the change, the better, honestly, because it's going to be more realistic to keep up. You have to be patient when you go this route, when you make small changes, but that's what's going to keep the changes long lasting, and then you're not going to have to start over again in a year. Then again, pick one change, move on to the next one once you feel comfortable with that change. Do not try to do too much at once. I'm going to say that again. It's going to be very difficult to do. Don't overdo it right away. Small changes are absolutely the best way to go. And then track your progress, whether that be just by the food you're eating, whether that be weight, whether that be measurements, whatever you want to track. Celebrate yourself. Tell your friends, your family, your coworkers what you did. Brag yourself up a bit. Before you know it, you're going to feel better and your numbers will show it too.
All right, and now that we know the importance of properly fueling our bodies, as well as the impact that exercise is going to have on our biometric results, it's time to figure out where the best place for us to get started is. Find anything that helps to get you started. You know that's better than doing nothing at all. So now that you take the step back, take time to decide what sort of activity you can actually see yourself doing and how practical it is to regularly maintain. For some people, establishing an exercise routine is a solid start. That could be grabbing your tennis shoes, strapping those on, and going for a brisk 30-minute walk a few days a week. Others may need to increase the intensity or find something that's more appealing to them so they don't get bored. Working out can be and should be fun. We will discuss a few different things to consider when trying to set up an exercise program that works well for you. One of the most important things is finding that type of activity you like and are physically capable of doing. Everyone is different, so weightlifting might be your thing, but maybe running long distances is not. You might enjoy swimming because it takes the pressure off your joints and has you feeling better. Or maybe a group fitness class, that community aspect of it keeps you engaged. That's really important too. Zumba classes are also fun ways to get in activity and can even distract you from the fact that you're even exercising at all. Getting in yard work, another great way to be productive, help you get around, and if you find that's the positive increase you need in your activity, that's an awesome start. So we know that there's a vast number of options for us to help stay active, and everyone should be able to determine what works well for them. So once you've found your type of activity, kind of take the time to decide what your schedule looks like, and establish that objective to exercise for a specific amount of time each day or a certain number of days per week. This goal will also be different for everyone, but if your schedule allows for it and you can tell yourself that you're going to exercise 5 days a week in order to help stay healthy, it then becomes something measurable. You can take the time to reflect on your week and see if you met your goal or, what changes you need to make the following week in order to help make that happen. This is a very similar strategy when it comes to tracking your nutrition. You can then reflect on your workouts and track how you did there, how long, and how many days per week. So these are great steps to hold yourself accountable. And now that you know what your workouts are going to be like and how many days you can plan on doing them, the next factor is finding ways to help plan and make sure it happens. I've definitely had some conversations with individuals where I've had to recommend that they treat their workouts the same way they would an appointment or work meeting that they simply cannot miss. This is an appointment, but you're scheduling it with yourself. So incorporating time into this busy schedule may be challenging, but definitely worth it. Even 20 minutes of activity is better than nothing at all, so utilize any free time the best you can. Some people prefer to get their workouts done first thing in the morning, and others, they just can't function that early.
You calling me out on that, Jordan?
Hey, I'm just saying, it's different for everybody. But definitely keep in mind what works best for you. So if you find that exercising after work is best, then take it a step further and make sure you pack your gym bag and bring everything that you're going to need for your workouts. So that way you don't have to go home and risk any temptation of not wanting to leave again. So if we're going to take a time to reflect, we'll break down and reiterate everything that was important in terms of planning the steps that will help you find an exercise routine that best suits you. First, we need to decide what sort of activity you can do, then determine how often you plan on doing this activity and what kind of planning is going to be required in order to help make it happen. So once you've gotten started, hopefully it feels like it's maintainable, and it will be important to stay consistent in order to create that habit change and see the results and benefits that exercising regularly will have on your health.
Planning ahead, that's a huge one with nutrition too that I didn't mention as much as Jordan did. You guys plan your weeks out and then celebrate your successes at the end of the week. Simple.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. That's all we got for you today. We'll open it up for questions here in a second, but just want to let you know the webinars that are coming up. Again, this month, 2-part series. So 2 weeks from today, June 19th, we have part 2 that we're going to talk about sleep and stress. Similar format, how each is affecting the biometrics and what you can do to help yourself in those areas. And then in July, we're going to talk about developing resilience. This is a big topic right now. Practicing optimism, healthy habits. Life is going to throw you curveballs. Let's talk about some ways that you can stay resilient in the face of change. And then here's our contact information. So we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, our blog. That's where you're going to find the recording of this webinar and all past webinars, as well as the PDF file if you want to download the slides. Go to that healthcheck360.com/blog. We're on Instagram, or if you want to chat more with a health coach, give us a call, number here, or shoot us an email, healthcoach@healthcheck360.com.